Alright, hey everyone, Anthon-64 here, and today, this isn't just some video about like gameplay or anything like that. The Let's Play is still going on for Rumble, by the way. Uh, anyway, this is just me wanting to talk about how DLC has been going recently. Like, not just like one company, but like all together, from past to currently and to possibly the future. So, I have a guest, obviously, to talk about this because it'd just be rambling from me otherwise. Introduce yourself.
Okay, what's going on, everyone? This is on Roy from the Royal Productions channel. I do a lot of podcasts. I do some random ass videos, ranting about stuff, and I do some reviews here and there. And I
I'll
have one
put,
coming up soon.
excuse me. I'll put his channel in the link in the description below. All right. So first off, as you've already know, DLC in short means downloadable content. And
Yeah.
recently, well, not recently, but back in the past, it usually means it used to add on content. In fact, that's what it used to be called before it was called DLC. It used to actually add on to the game. But within recent years, because of how business and sales work, just for their convenience, usually DLC is being worked in development when the game is also in development, and when the game comes out, there will be some DLC shortly after.
Yeah, exactly. That's how DLC has been handled in the most recent year, because most developers know that they can make a lot more money if they put DLC in mind. So, in that they either take content out from the game or make their own specific content for it for a smaller. They can make on the cheap while at the same time making a lot of money.
Speaking of stuff that's also like cost efficient, the reason for this is that back then when we used to have like cheat codes and stuff like that, with
Yeah.
games nowadays, it's apparently hard to develop into games today. Personally, it feels a bit, shady that some of the games and doesn't incorporate well with cheat codes, but they do well with DLC. But like for business reasons, it's understandable how this is more cost effective.
It is. It is. If people are buying the product itself, then there's a reason to make it. If the thing I tell everyone is that if you don't buy the stuff, then they're not gonna make it anymore.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So, if in recent years, as like the reason why I even brought this up is because recently the final Super Smash Bros. Video presentation has ended yesterday, and I gotta say it was pretty neat how they're handling some of these additional content.
Yeah. One thing you have to keep in mind is that the DLC was not developed in mind. After the game was developed and finished, they only intended to make Mewtwo, but because of so much fan demand, but because of how they want to include more characters and how fans were demanding for new characters, they decided to make DLC anyways.
Exactly. And within recent years of Nintendo as well, there was some good sides on DLC, and then there's Splatoon.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about Splatoon, which is the only positive I'll give it, is that they do give out free content. But unfortunately, when the game was initially released,
With an
there
A,
was
by the way.
yeah, when the game was initially released, it was barren in content. You only had your single player and one mode. You didn't get the rank battles until certain people got up to a certain level, I believe.
Level 10.
Yes. So it was kind of strange that they were spraying out the content so sparingly. They had bare content at first, but then eventually they started giving you more and more content. Which, mind you, all that content was locked behind a disc.
Yep. And granted, it really wasn't downloadable content because the game ran on a real clock timer, similar to Animal Crossing, where you get content within a specific amount of time in worldwide.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the reason why I brought Splatoon on particularly is the amiibo functionality. It's a paywall. Most of the
Yeah.
the challenges in the amiibo are basically the challenges you could have already played in a single player, but with a different weapon. There is that one challenge, the limited ink challenge, that is kind of like interesting to see how you can use it sparingly, but that doesn't change the fact that that could have been used. And all that is just for you to get weapons, some the costumes were okay for when the game was first released, but now there's just a lot more better options.
Exactly.
The weapons were just hero skins of the original that was also during the first release. So you were pretty much stuck getting the exact same weapon, but it looks different.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about the whole amiibo thing was they could have done a lot better with the amiibo content, but they decided to lock up challenges that probably would have been on the disc, but decided to put a paywall behind it. And I understand there's some collectors behind that whole mentality, but for people, for regular people who don't want the whole collecting aspect and just want to try out the challenges, it's kind of disappointing for them that they have to pay extra money for pieces of plastic in their mind.
Yep. And on top of that, there's mini games, and there's no, and like unlike the costumes and the weapons where there's like different variations of it, there's no other way to get this mini game. You can only get this from the amiibo, and during the time, the Squid amiibo was very popular. So yeah, you could tell how hard it was to get that one, because the worst part about it was that that's where you could play Squid Beats. That's the mini game where you're able to play the music in the game, including the music they recently included with the August update.
Interesting. And that was the worst example in terms of DLC was Nintendo. Sure, they have done things like season passes and all, but from what I've seen from their season passes, Nintendo at least gives enough content to warrant the purchase of a season pass.
Yeah. There's also some other companies, for example, but I've never really ran into something like that until Destiny. I really don't want to talk about Destiny at launch.
Well, yeah, Destiny was the worst case scenario, but in terms of modern equivalents today, I would say Star Wars Battlefront.
God dang it, EA.
Which is the worst representation of DLC and how you handle DLC.
Definitely.
It essentially is Splatoon, but the worst part is you have to cough up some money to get the DLC itself.
On top of that, was there any information with the additions?
They did explain some things, but I forgot.
Okay, because I remember when they first introduced this, people didn't even know what they were buying the stuff into, so they were just literally blindly purchasing the DLC at that point.
Yeah, and it's quite ironic that Darth Vader you see Darth Vader's face when you purchase the season pass. Telling me something there, EA? Join the dark side? Oh, whatever, I'm rambling there.
Alright, so recently, as I mentioned before, DLC is looking, so aside from a few bad examples, DLC is looking a little bit better up than it was within 2014, because 2014 was a really bad year for gaming.
Yes, we had Watch Dogs, which promoted the season pass up the ass, and then
Ubisoft had a really tough time in 2014.
Yeah.
Remember that Assassin's Creed Unity, the scary face glitch at launch? Oh
yeah.
God.
One thing I would commend EA for that, not EA, Ubisoft, is that when they found out the game was buggy as hell, they at least tried to make right, saying we'll give you this DLC for free.
Yeah.
Just to make up for it. And people who purchase a season pass would get a full-on refund, which commendable at the very least, but didn't excuse the fact for the game being launched like that.
Pretty much. It's just, I really don't understand why they didn't have some form of quality control before launch, or at least delay the game.
Oh man.
But on that note about DLC, that also includes updates in games.
Yeah, day one updates are kind of a little bit of sin in terms of the gaming industry, because you somewhat know that people are trying to make a quick buck with day one patches and day one DLC.
Oh, let's not talk about day one DLC. Day one DLC is absolutely the worst way to show and advertise your game. Okay, we plainly cut out content. Here's additional content at launch.
And you have to pay up that money for it.
Now, give me that money. Alright, but in terms of updates, you said earlier that it's usually day one updates. There's also the whole console things where you have to wait minutes, hours, and stuff like that for games to get updated before you can even play it. And there's like Xbox One, PlayStation 4, even Wii U is guilty of this.
Yeah. In terms of Wii U, in terms of like day one updates, you can see it almost everywhere with Nintendo games. Amiibo Festival, that garbage Amiibo game had day one updates.
Don't remind me.
Xenoblade Chronicles X had a day one update.
Oh, that was a
Uh,
really large game too. Well,
yeah.
for the Wii U, that is.
I believe well, Smash Bros. Also had a day one update. Splatoon did, which obviously Splatoon would have because it's a barren game at launch. And Mario Maker had day one updates. So yeah, so a lot of games have these day one updates, and you just wonder why do they have these updates? Was it pretty hard to put these small megabyte patches into the disk?
I do gotta commend Xenoblade Chronicles X for having some like form of downloading some stuff
Yeah,
into making the load times faster beforehand.
that to me makes sense. It makes sense for something like that to have something to make load times go faster, which makes me question something like Fallout 4 to where why you have to install everything into the hard drive and it still fucking loads forever.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's just alright. Also on updates, there's usually moments where a game technically we've already talked about this with the Ubisoft titles, where games are usually like either not very well polished, broken, like just doesn't work that well altogether, and then later within the game's lifespan, it actually gets patched up. And you can't forget about the people that constantly defend this kind of issue that happens with games. This
Like
has
here,
been a trend that started in 2014.
yeah. Here's one thing I have to say about that. Yes, the game will be updated later on, but the issue here is that, like, if the game's buggy as all hell, and you know that these people can easily fix it through a QA, and they rushed it out to the market just so they can get their quick buck, it is quite disgusting to see something like that happen. If you remember when we were discussing about Batman Arkham Knight on my channel,
Yeah, the PC version, right?
yep,
Oh
it was.
god,
You
that
can
took
tell,
forever for them to patch that.
yeah, and despite the fact the game has been patched out, you can tell there's still many issues with that game.
Kind of like with Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric.
Yeah. Well, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric is a completely different story. It's been through development hell,
Yeah,
and I wouldn't say that's part. I wouldn't say Sonic Boom is part of the issue. The games I would say that are part of the issue are games like Fallout 4, Batman Arkham Knight, Assassin's Creed Unity, a lot of the Bethesda games, so on and so forth, where they're very broken at launch and then they just fix it later on. And then we have polished games like Xenoblade Chronicles X, which have some bugs here and there, which is understandable, but it's not this buggy mess.
it's
at
not
launch.
game breaking either.
Yeah. So, and the only reason they do this is because because people are so apathetic toward this. They can just say, "Oh, I'll just wait for an update."
That's the worst part about it.
Which, yes, of course, there's gonna be an update and all, but to see this constantly and constantly from these third-party developers to fix the game later on because we want profits first, that mentality should go away because that loses trust amongst the consumer.
The trust and what is it? The trust and impressions that you have on a game should be something that happens at launch. You shouldn't have to wait until later to feel that you're gonna like this game or not, that you're gonna enjoy playing this game or not, be able to play this without dealing with anything like that, like long loading times or glitches or not.
Yeah. And I know this sounds a little bit too much of an entitlement to say, but whatever, I'll just say this anyways. Even though these people have lives and all, they should also be pleasing the customers that they're serving to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, that's not necessarily entitlement. Like, that's just, what is it? That's just a wide audience thing. Like, you're thinking of more than just a specific audience that has trouble.
Yeah. And I understand the fan base will be okay with this, but what if there's a guy out there that has never played a game before and then decides to get into gaming and then plays a buggy ass game like Fallout 4?
Oh, good God.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be a good first impression. You should always look forward you should always look at the people who are not going to be playing this or not watching this, and you should be appealing to them by having polished games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now the it's on now this is more so on the player side of things. Like when you think about people that talk about like a game at launch, they promote a game, think about how great this game is. Like most of the time you usually talk about someone who talks about like the amount of content there is rather than the quality of it, how enjoyable it is. Let's see, how can I compare this? There's one I need something I could compare this to. Like
What would you? Oh, can
like
you?
something that has vast amounts of hours put into a game, but it's average compared to something that's shorter, but much more noticeably higher in quality standards.
I would say one of the Bethesda games on like we'll take Skyrim for example, where Skyrim is this big expansive game that can go on for hours and hours and hours. I thought it was a boring game at best, but then when I played another RPG, namely Tales of Systeria, I had fun playing the game. There was this cohesive story where I was following through, and it was ultimately shorter than any of the Bethesda games, but I still had fun playing it.
Yes, and that's the most important thing about the game. In like terms of the player's point of view, you should be having fun with the game. Even if it is short, it should be something that you enjoy and something you can go back to. You don't want to play a game for hours and hours on end, and then when you finally beat it, you just don't feel the energy of playing it again.
And I would say making a game shorter can also be a double-edged sword because we all remember the Order 1886 when it came out,
Ah,
where it was extremely short, where it had no replay value of what sort.
that was more so a movie because an interactive movie at that because
Yeah.
the majority of the time was just you doing quick time events.
Yes, exactly. Like I would say, it's okay to have a short game, but keep in mind the perfect length of a game because you don't want to be way too short and you don't want to be way too long.
Yeah, the perfect range for for like certain type of games.
Yeah. Which, at bare minimum, you should at least have 10 hours of content. Doesn't need to be 20, it doesn't need to be 30, at least 10 hours of content, just so people gets their money's worth.
Oh
Well, that's
yeah. In terms of stuff like that in RPGs, the last thing I'm going to be talking about because I don't want to make this too long are stuff that are DLC that involve story. Like some games that usually cuts out part of the story that you won't understand because there's like a lack of context, but you have to wait until like there's like a DLC, a season pass, just to get the rest of everything and understand the story completely.
oh that's horrible right there.
Yeah, we know too many games with that kind of issue.
Because I love Tales of Systeria, but they did that also as well, which kind of makes me scratch my head to think about, oh, why did they do this? And in terms of those story DLCs, I'm perfectly fine if it's a side story, like in Batman Arkham Knight, even though it's a broken game anyways. They still had side stories with Batgirl, the Red Knight, things like that. I'm okay with side stories, but I'm not okay with the main story being sliced and diced into DLC.
No one should be no one should be okay with that. No one should be
Yeah.
okay with a game being like, let's say, cut in half. Like you get half a disc essentially, and then the rest of it gets sold to you at like the same price, or even more for some games. Sometimes DLC can cost more than what you're actually paying for from the game itself.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite baffling to see that companies would say, okay, let's take out this main story even though it's so important and let's slice and dice it up. And it's
Let's
just,
see, they'll never notice.
yeah, exactly. Because we all remember what happened with Mass Effect 3 at the end.
Mm, mm, mm.
Yeah, even though they offered that for free, still, why did they include those scenes all together?
Alright. There's usually more like I want to make a mention that there's sometimes like paywalls for like for technical unlock, which is like the thing that I was talking about for like on this DLC and day one on this DLC, like the absolute worst types of games. But like I said, that's gonna be it because I don't want to make this too long. It says Nocturnal 64.
And this is Roy from Royo Productions.
Out, and we'll see you in the next video or Rumble. So yeah, see ya.
See you next time.